When it comes to making art, there are a lot of things you need to worry about. You need to make sure the proportions are right, the perspective is right, and you need to make sure you get all the shading and lighting correct. But one thing that I doubt too many people think that much about is what color is the worst. It really isn't an important question because you're really only focused on what color you should use next. All colors can be used at some point or another, but I don't really care about that. I just want to know what color is the absolute worst. And so, around a year ago, I set off to try to figure out this really pointless mystery. I was really hoping there would have been someone at some point who made some sort of AI that looked at thousands of images and decided what color was used the least in them all. I don't think coding something like that would be that hard. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything. And although I am getting better at coding, I'm still quite far from being able to know how to do something like that. So then I thought maybe there'd be some study or something that went over what colors people liked. And while there were some, they always involved basic colors, like red, blue, or green. Those are obviously not the worst colors. The worst color would be a lot more exact. One study did find that this color was the worst, and for a while I kind of accepted that answer, but it just didn't feel right. Like this color, sure, painting like your entire house in it might not look the best, but in art, like do you know how common this color is? Like look at this picture. It's used like everywhere in it. Or look at this green color. Sure, it's bad if you cover your toilet in it, but in a painting it works great. Actually, these kinds of colors are very important for art. Using grays in art is something that I used to not do that much, but it's a very important thing to use to guide the viewer's attention. Using gray can make some colors look more saturated, or can even cover up areas you don't really want people to look at. As ugly as they are on their own, they're definitely not the worst color. Even this color, which was actually used on cigarette packages because it was considered the ugliest color. This is because they wanted cigarette companies from making any kind of advertising, so they had to make the boxes for cigarettes as bad and unappealing as possible. And so they used this color. Yet, I can still see a lot of ways that this could be used in art. Like, sure, on its own, something like a muddy gray-brown color might not be a good color, but when it's used in art, it can't be the worst color. I don't think there's really any sort of combination of gray or brown or any of these more desaturated tones that could be the worst color for art. The worst color would have to be something that's specific and bright, something that no matter what image you use it in would kind of ruin it unless everything is completely focused around it. I also found a strange amount of people who are oddly passionate about hating the color green, which I found odd and kind of funny. Like there were some people who wrote a good deal just on why they hated the color green, though a lot of these points really don't hold up at all. Like it reminds them of pollution or radiation or snot or vomit. The problem with that is those things aren't green, at least not usually. I mean, I know my snot's not green at least. I feel like snot is more transparent or gray or brown or something. Not really green usually. And pollution is black or gray or brown. Can't really think of something being polluted then turning green. And radiation isn't green. The whole thing about radiation looking green in games or cartoons isn't real. Radium is kind of green, and that was radioactive, so that's probably where it started. It was used a lot in the 1960s in paint, and people liked it because it would glow. Then, of course, when it was discovered to be radioactive, people stopped using it. And because it was kind of a big deal, sure, people just started associating radiation with green. But radiation really can just as easily be any color. And of course, green is such a vague term. Like, there are so many things that fall under the category of green. Green is definitely one of the best colors. This is not an argument. I would not listen to anyone who believes otherwise. And then there's yellow, which is another one that people often say is the worst. And I can understand this one a bit more. I don't really like the plain, bright yellow color that much. I mean, I really like when it's shoved over to this orange side a bit more. Actually, that's like probably one of my top favorite colors. It's kind of golden yellow color, and this purplish color. I mean, it's in my channel logo, so it's kind of obvious these are my favorite colors. But when it comes to like the normal bright yellow, I still don't think it's that bad. Sure, it's not everywhere in nature like green, but because of how easily it can be used in things like fire and light, and like really when you're trying to light anything, yellow is the most important color. It may not be the actual color of many objects, but it's a very common color for light, and light is definitely one of the most important things when making art. Like imagine trying to paint a scene without yellow. There's a lot of scenes that wouldn't work well by that. If it's in the daytime, you need yellow for making things feel warmer. Like imagine trying to paint a forest scene without yellow. Sure, green is definitely going to be the most common color there, assuming it's like in the summer or something, but yellow is going to be used a lot on things for the light. I think it really just comes down to the fact that saying yellow is the worst color is again way too vague. The worst color would be very exact. It wouldn't just be this vague green or yellow or purple is the worst. It needs to be a lot more specific than that. I also can't say something like black is a bad color. Like, again, it's not something you really want to surround yourself with too much. I mean, unless you're like goth, and of course it's often associated with evilness and used for villains and bad guys. But it's just so important. Like, look anywhere, like, literally anywhere, and unless you're like staring at the sun, you're going to see black somewhere. You can't escape it. It's the darkest color, so it's the most important color for any sort of contrast in an image. And it's exactly the same case with white. The worst color has to be very specific, and although I haven't seen many people talk about this color, I think I know which one is the worst. It's one that I've always really hated. Whenever I'd have pencils or markers, it'd always be the one that's the fullest, because I would never touch it. It's a color that like I literally only have seen being used to catch your attention because of how much it stands out and doesn't fit with anything. I've seen a lot of characters with different weird color combinations, but I honestly can't recall ever seeing someone attempt to make a character with this as the main color. Heck, I hardly see people even using this color for anything more than like a tiny stripe or a dot. And this color, although I'm not sure if it has an exact name, I've seen a few places call it different names, I like to refer to it as neon yellow. Like, I dare you to try to make something with it that looks good. I only ever see it being used on construction because of how bright and distracting it is. If you use it for lighting, it looks like it's radioactive or glowing or something. It's way too bright to use on any normal object or wall. You could use it for like some monster's glowing eyes, but even with that, I find yellow looks better. Not this weirdly green yellow. I guess you could also use it for some sort of magical effect, but that's pretty bad if you have to resort to that, when magic can literally be any color. Like, when was the last time you even saw this color being used in art? I feel like even if you're crazy and like this color, you still have to admit that this color rarely works in art. And that's why I feel confident when I say that this is the worst color to use in art. And just so you know, my hatred for this color does not extend to the more desaturated or dark in the tones. Those are very useful and very common. It's just when you get to this very bright section, right between the yellow, kind of starting to transition over to green, that's where it gets bad. And I think all our art could improve if we just pretend this section of the color wheel doesn't exist.